Hello and welcome. UVA Speaks is a podcast of Lifetime Learning, a division of the Office of Engagement at the University of Virginia. Lifetime Learning brings the knowledge and expertise of UVA's faculty to the university's alumni, friends, and families. My name is Susan Lynch, and I am the Associate Director of Lifetime Learning at the University of Virginia's Office of Engagement. This podcast features Abby Fines, Assistant Professor in the Department of Kinesiology and the Director of the Kinesiology Lifetime Physical Activity program at the School of Education and Human Development at the University of Virginia. She oversees more than 35 academic courses designed to equip students with sport-specific knowledge and skills to enjoy a physically active lifestyle. With a background in adaptive physical activity, Fines specializes in sports development for individuals with intellectual, physical, and sensory disabilities at various levels of play and competition. Her research examines how to provide equitable opportunities for participation, particularly for the para-athlete in athletics across school and community settings. In this podcast, Professor Fines will talk with us about her work at the School of Education, Human Development, and beyond. So thank you, Professor, for speaking with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a little nervous, but excited to talk
about please don't
what I do.
Just here to talk about your work. So first, can you tell us about your background and what brought you to the University of Virginia?
Absolutely. So I feel like I have to start from my time as an undergrad at UVA. So when I was applying to colleges, I was one of those people that did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I liked sports. I had been through physical therapy myself, and I also had done some volunteer work in high school with the special education department. So I was really looking for something related to sports and disability. I'm going to say my mom did a lot of the legwork in trying to find a university that offered those. And at the time, we had no idea how those would interrelate. I did not know the field of adapted physical activity existed. Really, it was just like, okay, maybe I could pursue one of these opportunities, something with sports or something with disability. But I ended up at UVA. And ultimately, it was because I knew it would provide opportunity and I thought it was a pretty school. But ended up at UVA and spent my 4 years of undergraduate time there. And I did the kinesiology program, which I now work in. At the time, it was only a 2-year program. So my first 2 years at UVA was doing prerequisites. Then I applied to the undergraduate program, got in. And so my 3rd and 4th year were spent within the program. At the time, we had concentrations. And so I originally pursued the sports medicine concentration, kind of pursuing that physical therapy track that I mentioned. But then I took a course called Kinesiology for Individuals with Disabilities under Dr. Luke Kelly. And it was opened up to more of the world about disability and specifically Paralympic sport. So sport for people with physical disabilities and vision impairments. We played wheelchair basketball at the end of the semester, and I just kind of fell in love and was like, okay, what does this look like if I was to pursue this field? So in the summer of 2013, I took an internship with a nonprofit organization called Sportable, spelled Sport-able. It's in Richmond, Virginia, and it is a nonprofit that puts on sports for people with physical disabilities and vision impairments. And so that summer, I was mentored by a colleague, Becky, and I just had the time of my life. My very first experience was going to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I went to a Paralympic it was put on by the United States Paralympic Committee, and it was a conference. And so I just dove right in, learning about the research, learning about equipment, the people. It was an amazing experience. And then throughout the summer, I got to learn more about how to put on sports for people with physical disabilities. And I just realized the power of sport, right, transcends whether you have a disability or not. And it's a beautiful game. It has the same benefits, physical, mental, social. It brings about camaraderie. And again, just fell in love. But then I also realized that there's more than meets the eye as well. And I just remember this one specific conversation that I had with my mentor, Becky, about kind of the hierarchy of disability. And the differences between somebody who might be a wheelchair user versus an amputee and have a prosthetic. And ultimately, this tension between how visible somebody's disability is. So there's a spectrum of invisible to visible. And if somebody can hide their disability, they can be more accepted into society, or even just play sport at a different type of level if their disability is more accepted by society. So I was like, this is amazing. And my fourth year at UVA, I changed my concentration to adapted physical education. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher, but I wanted to make sure I could take the courses that had to do with disability and sport, and also give me some teaching/coaching experience. And then my fourth year at UVA, I took a class called Motor Development under Dr. Martin Block. And he was gone for a week, maybe 2 weeks. And when he came back, he told us why. And it was because every year he would go overseas and teach for a master's program in adapted physical activity. And I was like, okay, sign me up. Like, well, this is perfect. I didn't know this field existed. There's a program I can go to. I can go overseas. Amazing. So my fourth year, I applied to 2 opportunities. I applied to a position with the NCAA, their diversity, equity, and inclusion, or whatever division that was called. Didn't get that. And then I also applied to this master's program overseas, and I got that. So one door closed, one door open, took the open door. So after I graduated from UVA, I went overseas for 2 years to get my master's in adapted physical activity. The program was called a MAPA, or Erasmus Mundus Masters in Adapted Physical Activity. And ultimately what that meant is that there was just partner schools that put on this master's program. So there was a cohort of about 15, maybe 20 of us. And we were all together the first year taking classes together. We were in Leuven, Belgium. And then as we took more classes, we picked our own concentrations, right? Our own research and thesis work. And so the second year we split up. So that first year was really awesome because I basically got a disability and international perspective on top of the kinesiology coursework I already took at UVA in undergrad. And then in my second year, I was in Limerick, Ireland, and then also 3 months in Stellenbosch, South Africa. And so that's when I was diving into research. My research interest was this concept called reverse integration. So having able-bodied or non-disabled people play the disabled or para sports, and what that looked like and what were the consequences of that, what were the pros and cons. And then I also got to do a lot of internship type work within that year as well. And in South Africa, I got to work with the Paralympic track and field athletes that trained at Stellenbosch University. So it was a really cool experience. No, I didn't pick up any foreign languages, but I got really good at reading people context for the most part. So after I finished my 2 years in that master program, I came back to the United States. I worked in Durham, North Carolina for about a year and a half at a Paralympic sport club. So like the organization I worked in Richmond, Sportable, I worked for a similar organization in Durham, North Carolina, where I was a program director. I put on sports for youth, adults, veterans with physical disabilities, as well as vision impairments. And then I got to coach a couple sports as well. I coached a youth wheelchair basketball team. And then I also coached a sport called our youth goalball program, which is a sport specifically designed for people with vision impairments. And during that time, I loved what I did. I loved coaching. The hours were weird, but I just was enthralled with this movement that I was now becoming a part of. I got to see again the power of sport and what that means, the camaraderie of sport and the impact that it had on athletes and their families, and also the impact it would make on society and the public once they were able to witness it. But I also realized that the movement was pretty fragmented. So although almost every person I met was willing to give you a helping hand, right? When I was coaching, they were willing to give me advice or like point me to some good resources. Those resources were hard to find. And then it felt like every new organization was kind of reinventing the wheel instead of having this higher structure that was helping athletes and programs develop. So surprisingly, at least surprising to me at the time, I applied for my PhD. And I had a couple different uh, programs in mind, but again, ended up saying yes to UVA again because it was pretty and I like Charlottesville. I didn't necessarily want to live in Louisville. So as I was waiting to come back to UVA, I took a consultant position with Special Olympics International, based in DC. And so I moved up to Alexandria for about a half a year. And so that's kind of the other side of the spectrum, Paralympics and then Special Olympics. And I was a consultant for fitness in schools. So I was on their fitness team, and ultimately my role was to try to figure out how to make sure the fitness programming was being integrated with the school programming that they were doing. So realizing there's power in sport, but we want to make sure that all of the Special Olympic athletes were living healthy lifestyles as well. So then after that, I came back to UVA. I did my PhD under Dr. Martin Block. And yeah, I must have done something right because after my PhD, they hired me. But really, I think it's God's timing, and a couple of my mentors and supervisors retired. So Dr. Luke Kelly, Dr. Diane Whaley, thank you for retiring and leaving a position open for me. And so now I'm an assistant professor in the kinesiology department. Um, my professor, who became my advisor, is now my colleague, and same with the rest of the department. So it's really cool to still be at UVA and continue my work.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, a lot of alumni listen to this, and I'm sure that some will understand that you found your passion here at UVA, and how wonderful that you've been able to continue that. That's really, and come back. That's great.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the classes that you teach and what you're really wanting your students to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the introduction, you mentioned that I'm the director of the Lifetime Physical Activity program, which I am. So in SIS, I am the listed as a teacher for the 35 to 40 classes every semester. They're 1 credit physical activity classes, but I do not teach all of those. I just direct that program. So we have secondary instructors that are actually the primary ones that are within those classrooms, but I do get a lot of student emails thinking that I teach all of those classes. And I promise you, you don't want me to be your yoga instructor. Class would last 10 minutes and then be like, okay, bye, let's go run outside. But the classes that I teach for the kinesiology department, I teach a few, but the disability specific ones, there's one in the fall. It's called Kinesiology for Individuals with Disabilities. And that's my undergrad class. And it's the same class that I took when I was in undergrad. But I would like to think over the years I've transformed it and kept it up to date with research and new topics. And then in the spring, I teach a graduate level class called Disability in Sport. So really my bread and butter, at least I'd like to think so, in the spring. So the fall class, Kinesiology for Individuals with Disabilities, a mouthful, we abbreviate it to KID. Ultimately, I want students to realize that disability is valuable and relevant. Our undergraduate students are pursuing various healthcare fields, whether it is pre-med, pre-PT, OT, AT, list goes on. I keep having dentists in the class. And then, of course, there's a couple of students that, right, probably are actually going to pursue medical sales or more of a business aspect. One year, we even had a student that wanted to be a tattooed artist, but kinesiology was the most related thing for that. So, but I want, no matter what field that they're going into, I want them to realize that they're going to work with people with disabilities, and what that means and what that looks like. Ultimately, people with disabilities are people. But there's some things right now in this time that we can learn about them. And so I want them to realize that first, thinking about how we think about accessibility. So we talk about legislation related to disability, what accessibility looks like within our physical space. But then I also want them to think about accessibility beyond that as well, and what it really looks like to include people with disabilities. So we talk about different frameworks of inclusion in order to think about that. And I think one thing is also realizing there's different ways we can define disability. And one way to do that is through a medical or social model lens. And for healthcare, that medical model lens is very relevant. And that's seeing the disabled person as disabled, that their impairment is their impairment is the thing creating their disability. Which to some degree is true. But we also need to consider the social model lens, which says that it's the world that's making them disabled. It's society that's making them disabled. And when we think about that, we can think about the barriers that we can take down, right? And I think like the easy examples are making sure that there's elevators, making sure that there's parking, making sure that there's curb cuts, in a fitness or gym space, making sure that equipment is spaced enough so somebody in a wheelchair can access every piece of equipment or reach every piece of equipment. And then I think too, for just as professional development, it's saying yes the moment somebody with a disability walks through our door and not being afraid of them. And I say that in a way that means just like, don't be afraid to start a conversation. Don't be afraid that you're going to say the wrong thing, right? Just treat them like another patient that's coming through your door. And yes, you might there might be some trial and error. There might be a different way you have to communicate, right? There might be some modifications that you have to make along the way, but ultimately that person's coming to you for a medical condition that you're probably an expert in. And so you have some expertise that you can help with them. So don't turn them away, and make sure that you say yes to them. I think a way to like at the end of the semester, the idea of I when I was I do a lot of work with the PE side as well, and somebody told me, I think in undergrad, right, adapted PE is good PE, or adapted physical educators are good physical educators, right? Because no matter what we're doing, we're always modifying and making adaptations. And so when we're working with people with disabilities, we might just do that on another level. We might have to be just a little extra creative, or think outside the box just a little more. And I like to put that in whatever profession that our undergrads are doing. So if somebody wants to be a physical therapist, right, adapted physical therapy is good physical therapy. You already make adaptations, so you just might have to do it a little differently if somebody with a physical disability or an intellectual disability walks through your door. And we do that for ourselves too. If you exercise, right? If you do strength training and you're doing push-ups and you might have a regular push-up, you might get on your knees if you need an easier push-up, right? You might make it harder and clap in between each push-up if you want to make it harder. So modifications are just changes. They are just adaptations. They don't have to make something easier or harder. They could just make something different. And so just for students to understand what that looks like. And again, just that they say yes to disability when it walks through their door. And I know I rambled a little bit there, and then in the spring, for my graduate level class of disability in sport, it's adding on to that and the lens of sport and physical activity more specifically. So disability lies on a spectrum. Again, I mentioned earlier, from visible to invisible, it could be acquired, to congenital, really this lifespan perspective. And if we think about it that way, let's make sure that we think about sport, physical activity, and recreation opportunities in the same way. Are we providing opportunities where somebody young with a disability can get involved, or the older population can get involved? Are we providing things that are just for people with disabilities as well as where they can be included? And just thinking about that spectrum of opportunities so that they can reap all of the benefits. In the kinesiology department, we talk about that exercise is medicine. And so exercise is medicine. It's the same thing for the disabled population. And I just want to make sure that we promote that and think about the different movements that can be happening and what inclusion can look like within those movements, in order to make sure that equitable opportunities exist.
That's great. Sort of a lens that they can carry forward into everything that they're doing. Something for all of us to think about. That's great. Thank you. So beyond the classroom, how do you bridge your teaching, research, and service at the university?
Yeah, so I am general faculty. So my main focus is the director of the LPA program as well as teaching classes. But I very much still enjoy collaborating with people in research projects that are related to my teaching and to advancing support for people with disabilities. I would say that, so like one project I'm working on with some colleagues from a few different universities is to critically reflect on our pedagogy within the field of adapted physical activity and what that looks like. And ultimately, are are our students taking away the outcomes that we want them to? And a big part of that is this use of disability simulations. These are hands-on activities, experiential learning activities that we really like to use because we like to be hands-on in our field. But there's pushback on them because there can often be consequences, unintended consequences of what we're trying to actually teach. So an example would be for students to get into wheelchairs and push around grounds, ultimately to see the accessibility or rather inaccessibility of grounds. Or having students in class put on blindfolds and doing some activities that might simulate to some degree having a vision impairment. And these are activities that I do in my class, at least in some fashion. And I have to check my own bias because to some degree, this is why I got in the field, was having these hands-on experiences. But I think it's being in this research and shaping these activities in a way that's making sure that we realize that we can't perfectly simulate a disability. We're never going to truly understand the experience. Everybody's going to have their own lived experience. So are the actual objectives that I want students to take? If they get into a wheelchair, um, I want them to realize first, like you might be helping patients get into wheelchairs. So what would a transfer look like? What do you need to know about what they might be experiencing on the day to day that's going to impact their shoulder injuries, right? So some more tangible, practical, pragmatic way of thinking about it and really making sure that they understand that this is not what a lived experience of disability is going to be like. So we're still working through that. But I would like to think every semester I'm able to shape these activities a little better in a way that makes sure that students um, leave with what we want them to leave and learn. And again, I have some bias because I really don't want to let go of those activities. I want students to have those hands-on experience, but it's really interesting to be able to reflect on those opportunities. And then other research is really just making sure that we advance opportunities. And I think something that I've really learned is that there's a gap in our field and that there's policy exists, but it doesn't always get implemented. And so I think over the last several years, as an assistant professor at UVA, I have been trying to create opportunities or support opportunities at UVA. And I will be honest that originally I didn't know UVA could be a home because I was scared that it was too inaccessible for any sort of adapted or para programming. And also, there's not a community organization super close by with multiple sports that I'd be like, okay, well, I could teach and still be involved in the community. But I realized we got to start somewhere. And so as I've been teaching and working here, right, being able to provide little seeds. And so a few years ago, I was able to support the growth of a wheelchair tennis club team. So it's a club organization under the recreation department. And it's completely student run, but I would like to think that I still support them and do some behind the scenes work with that and being able to support them. And so it's a smaller team because there's a fewer number of athletes on grounds that participate, but they've had a lot of success and the athletes have improved every year. And they do really well in nationals for the past couple years. So the wheelchair tennis team. One project I worked on with one of our doctoral students was about this program called Paralympic School Days. And her research was looking at how to build it into a professional development for physical education teachers. And while we were doing this programming, we're like, we should do an opportunity at UVA for it. And so we had a Paralympic school day type opportunity in a couple falls of semesters ago. And students came through three different stations, a wheelchair basketball station, a sitting volleyball station, and a goalball station, and just got to experience these para sports. But what's the beautiful part about it is that they're experiencing it alongside athletes with disabilities. So they're getting exposed to the sport, but getting exposed to these athletes, realizing that they're athletes and these sports are sports. And there's, again, disability is not something we need to shy away from. And then with a different doctoral student, the following year, we were like, well, how can we informalize this so it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't take too much planning, doesn't require research, and also can be open to more people. And so we had an event last spring, 2024, called Wheelchair Takeover Paralympic Pickups. And we had them on the outdoor courts of Mem Gym. And we had wheelchair pickleball, wheelchair rugby, and wheelchair basketball. And ultimately, we just invited people to come between a block of time and they could just hop in a chair and play. We had about 50 people, I think, come. And I think the thing that we always realize is like people come tentative. They come because maybe a teacher volunteered them to come. But then we had several students leave and being like, well, when's the next one? Like, when are you guys doing this again? And we're like, yes, this is what we want, right? A pickup game of anything is a pickup game. And this, just because you're adding a wheelchair, the same thing can be true. So, Matt Lowry, a doctoral student, and I were like, okay, let's keep doing this. So last fall, we informalized it even more. And ultimately, we just started having pickup games. And I think we had three different sessions. I think we had two wheelchair basketball ones and one wheelchair rugby one. And we just picked a day of the week. We met at the AFC and invited people to come. And we had, I think every single time, we had enough people to have a game going. So it's not mass numbers, but it's enough for a pickup game and you're getting exposure. And if anything, we definitely strategically want it at the AFC so we can watch all the students walk by staring and being like, what's happening in there? So having these events, creating that exposure becomes so important. And then we actually had our first spring pickup last week of wheelchair rugby. And again, we had enough people for a pickup game. So we're excited to do a few more of those. And we're excited to do a few more of those leading up to the first inaugural Roll with Gym. So like the Run with Gym events that people are pretty familiar with, that are usually a run walk experience and President Ryan attends. We're doing a Roll with Gym on Wednesday, April 16th, from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. And President Ryan has said yes to coming from 4 to 5 p.m. So we hope that nothing in his schedule prevents him from doing that. But it's going to be a little different. It's not going to be a run walk. We have a lot of reasons for that, but it's going to be more of like an adaptive sports or para sports festival. Our vision, hopefully, because it's going to be a sunny day, it's going to be great. It's going to be outside of MIM, and we're going to take over the basketball courts, take over a few of the tennis courts and the soccer field as well, and have a bunch of wheelchair sports as well as maybe some other things trickled in there as well for students to come out and participate anytime between there. And we'll have athletes with disabilities that are participating. And someone we're really excited that's attending is Trayvon Jennifer. He is a 3-time gold medalist wheelchair basketball player. And yeah, so they recently won gold in the Paris 24 Paralympics, and he's going to be attending and hanging out and showing everybody how fast and how great he is at wheelchair basketball. And then I know he'll be able to share his story as well. So Roll with Jim, something we're super excited about.
That's wonderful. That's great to hear. Yeah. For those outside of UVA, President Ryan is an avid marathon runner and has done these runs since he started here as president several years ago. And so it's great to see an adaptive opportunity for that. That's wonderful. So finally, what is your vision for the field of adapted physical activity at UVA or even in a broader context beyond in the community?
Yeah. I feel like that question I just have been pondering a lot lately. And the reason is because of that I was able to attend several days of the Paris 24 Paralympics. It was an amazing professional development opportunity. Um, just getting to see the games at that elite level, getting to overhear spectator conversations, getting to see athletes, just getting to see the way Paris was operating was a super cool experience. And ever since some of these questions I um, initially had when I was first working have been resparked. And I'm I think the biggest thing though is how do we bring more awareness and exposure to this field? It has grown so much since I first entered it. It has expanded. People are more familiar with the name, and yet we still have so much more to grow. And so, how do we keep growing this awareness? And there's just not this critical mass of athletes with disabilities. And even if there is a lot of people with disabilities, right, they all have different types of disabilities. So we're always going to run across that barrier. But I think my vision is just that we keep breaking down barriers at UVA. We realize that accessibility is both breaking down the barriers and creating new programs and creating new opportunities, saying yes to things we might not be used to, and making sure that disability is always a part of the conversation. I think it is the largest minority group, and yet it's the one that constantly gets left out of diversity conversations. And I think it's hard too, because even if there's somebody with a disability sitting at the table, they're usually speaking to their one experience. So, how can we make sure that we're inviting even more voices and even more people into these conversations in these spaces? So, I think my vision is really a hope that we keep just saying yes to disability and that we keep moving forward and realizing, again, it is a big population. And sometimes we have to break this chicken or the egg cycle because there's not that critical mass. And we have to say yes to new things, even if we don't know if they're going to work out. And I would like UVA to realize, right, disability is beyond SDAC accommodations, right? We want students to be successful in our class, but I think sometimes as staff and faculty, that is our perception of disability or just the accommodations that come through our inboxes. And so again, making sure that we want all students to thrive. And so to help them thrive is beyond the classroom as well. And it's beyond other opportunities we can provide at UVA within Charlottesville and beyond.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Fines, for sharing this information about your teaching, research, and service. It is important for all of us to think about disabilities, how we think about that, how we adapt, how we help people. And all of us, as we grow older, might come upon a different way that we need to adapt to things. So all of this is very important for us to think about. And I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise with UVA's alumni, friends, and families. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this time.
Great. And thank you all for listening. For upcoming podcasts and other lifetime learning programming, recordings, and blogs, please visit our website at engagement.virginia.edu/learn. You can also find our podcasts on the Virginia Audio Collective, which is a network of UVA podcasts hosted by WTJU Radio and can be found at thevirginiaaudio.org. So thanks again, and we look forward to you participating in future lifetime learning programs.